Welcome to this session of the 6G Symposium. We're going to be talking about sustainable networks that are more than just energy efficient. I'm Jim Morrish. I'm a founding partner of Transformer Insights, a firm of industry analysts, and I'm going to be your host for this session this afternoon. We've got some great panelists. Just by way of introduction, though, it's becoming clear that technology plays a very strong enabling role in enabling sustainability in the wider economy and society. And the typical dynamic is that investment in technology can unlock savings in the operational phase of new technologies to be offset against investments that are made in manufacturing phases, distribution phases, and of course the costs at end of life. And within that, there's some key dynamics on the consumer side. Many of the investments in technology are for better propositions for consumers and are not necessarily sustainability enhancing. On the enterprise side, it tends to be the reverse. You tend to get investments in making products and processes better and processes more efficient, which tends to unlock savings, particularly on the enterprise side. But all of this depends on networks, communications networks and digital technologies, and communicating between devices and people. And it's critical for those networks to be as sustainable as possible. But the same considerations apply to those networks. It's not just about sustainability in the real life, the live operations phase of those networks. There are many more considerations upstream, downstream, what happens with network assets when they're swapped out, and how the whole network is managed. So we're going to discuss some of these things in our panel today. I have four great panelists. We're actually one short at the moment because she'll be joining later. But we have Akihiro Nakao, who is chairman of the International Committee of the Beyond 5G Promotion Consortium. We have Marie-Paul Odini, who is chair of Green G, the Next G Alliance, and a distinguished technologist at HPE. We have Max Schultz, who is the founder of the Sustainable Digital Infrastructure Alliance, and we will have, when she can join us, Seema Ansari, who is a senior partner manager for Deutsche Telekom and project lead of Green Future Networks at the NGMN. So without further ado, what I would like to do is I'd like to ask Max to provide a bit of an introduction to this topic and an overview of how we might define sustainability and how we might think about it.
Thank you, Jim. Indeed. So my name is Max Schultz. I always play the role of the educator. I have a very technical background, but I like to talk a little bit about sustainability. I come from the SDA. The SDA is a non-profit organization, and we work on, first of all, measuring the environmental footprint of the entire digital economy. And then we have a roadmap in place, a very large one on our website, that shows what we need to do to reduce that environmental footprint. Without further ado, I'll share my screen and I'll explain. It will be very brief, but I hope that I can add to this, not the technical details, but more the big picture. I think the very first one, the word of sustainability, which is being used a lot right now, not in a negative sense. I think it's good that we're talking about sustainability a lot, but we also have to realize that sustainability does not equal efficiency. It is not about efficiency. It is about using less resources, using less to perform ideally the same function. And the term actually is a new term. It was defined in 1987 by the United Nations Brundtland Commission in the very famous Brundtland Report. And it was defined for the first time as sustainability is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And that's a very, very important definition that we always need to come back to. Sustainability in itself has three pillars. It's about economic viability, that's the yellow pillar. It's about social equity, so is it equitable? Can everybody participate? It's about environmental protection, so reducing the environmental footprint that technology, for example, creates. And ultimately also, it has to be economically viable. In an ideal scenario, what we all want is we want the same economic growth or even more economic growth without any further environmental impact, and economic growth in which everybody can participate, and that is to the benefit of all of humanity, and that would be sustainable economic growth, for example. Diving a little bit deeper, into the idea of or the topics around sustainability and also applying it a little bit to networks. A good way to look at it, for example, is resource depletion, which is something that I explain a lot. Unfortunately, I don't have data for how much copper is in a mobile phone tower, so I'm going to use in renewable energy, which is a topic that a lot of people are familiar with. If you take wind and PV, for example, there's an enormous demand for copper that goes into these assets. And I think we can all agree that without renewable energy, a lot of the efforts that we're making today are impossible. So I think it is, there's no alternative to this. We need renewable energy, therefore we must put more copper into it. But for example, copper doesn't have to be mined. It can be recycled or can be taken out of other equipment. All other industries outside of renewable energy will have to continue to figure out ways how to deliver a product, deliver a new technology, 6G. It can be new network technology on fiber, without consuming additional resources. And I know Marie-Paul will have a slide on this later. It's the buzzword of circular economy, is to repurpose all the inputs, all the resources that went into a device, and using it again and again and again and again. And this is something we really need to keep in mind if we want to cover the world with, let's say, high-performing networks that connect all these devices to each other. We must figure out a way how to do that with minimal or ideally no additional resource consumption. That's not just because we deplete our planet of these resources, but every mining activity, every activity of extracting something from the planet always comes with CO2. It always comes with acidification of water. It always has an environmental side effect. And that's part of the reason why extraction is maybe not the most sustainable thing to do. Another concept, and again, these things are all distinct, right? They are not, carbon neutrality is not about necessarily sustainability. Carbon neutrality is, for example, just about reducing carbon. So there's all these aspects that need to be considered. There's another one, which is planetary boundaries, which basically, I hope you read the news a little bit. We already burst through most of our planetary boundaries. So the growth we have today, the society we have today, our planet cannot support. So there is, and again, it's not about efficiency, it's about reduction. It's about reducing the total footprint that our society has on this planet. So again, any form of economic growth, any form of expansion needs to come with ideally a reduction at the same time. And that's what we need to embed into all our economic thinking, into business, into making products, into designing services, into designing businesses. Everything needs to be either not adding new environmental impact or societal impact, but needs to come with either reduction or not adding anything, a zero, to be really precise. This brings us to the measurement aspect, and then I'm almost through with my educational piece. I have this discussion with a lot of people in hardware, in data center, in networks, in software engineering, and that is, how do you measure all this? How do you measure sustainability? And I've seen now across many industries that everybody comes up with new metrics and new ways to measure it and to quantify it, but the world has agreed on a way to do that, which is the life cycle assessment, which is a ISO standard, which is part of environmental management practices. So there is currently no social LCAs to measure the impact on the society, but there is an environmental LCA, which is a very standardized way to measure the environmental impact of almost any product that we have in our society. And I would like to urge everybody, ultimately, if I want to, for example, determine how much Netflix is using how much environmental impact is in a Netflix stream, I will need the life cycle assessment of a mobile phone network, for example. So every object, every part of our digital world needs to have life cycle assessment data available. It does not help to have percentages or KPIs around energy alone, or it does also not help to say, well, it doesn't matter because it's all green electricity that goes in. Everything needs to have a independently verified life cycle assessment, which then turns into an environmental product declaration, an EPD. and that is very important. I think at HPE, Marie-Paul, there's a lot of people probably already thinking about how to do that for servers, and this needs to happen for every object in our digital world. Otherwise, people like me who try to measure everything will have a very difficult time doing it. Those are the three key concepts that I want to leave you with. Sustainability is not about energy efficiency. It's about preserving our planet for the next generation. It is about reduction. We have to think about resource depletion. And last but not least, we have to think about our planetary boundaries and making the environmental footprint of everything transparent within LCA. Those are my messages to you, and I'll give it back to Jim to give it to somebody else.
Thank you very much, Max. It's very interesting, very helpful background there to clarify and set a baseline. I'd just like to comment that this will be turning into a discussion session a little later, so we will be accepting questions. There is a Q&A function in the interface that you're looking at. If you're out there, you're looking at there should be a Q&A function, so please do submit questions in there. And we will pick them up as and when we can, but I'm sure we'll get to a good number of them. At that point, I would like to invite Aki to present a little about some of the developments that are in Japan, the transformation strategy that's ongoing, and some of the aims for 2030 and beyond.
Thanks, Jim. So let me pull up my slides and share it. Hi, everyone. I'm Aki Nakao at the University of Tokyo, and also I'm wearing the hat of Chairman of International Committee Beyond 5G Promotion Consortium. As Jamie introduced me, coming from Beyond 5G Promotion Consortium, I'm going to introduce our promotion activity towards the Beyond 5G, especially today. And I put the title of my slides towards a sustainable Beyond 5G infrastructure. So let me briefly introduce myself. I'm a special advisor to the president of the University of Tokyo, and I'm in the Department of System Innovations, the School of Engineering, and I'm teaching there at University of Tokyo. But I'm wearing the hats of lots of government committee members, and also where I'm a chairman of 5G and Beyond 5G related committee, and involved not just the research but also in policy making and all that. And today I'm presenting my views towards the sustainable Beyond 5G infrastructure from the point of view of the Beyond 5G Promotion Consortium. So Beyond 5G Promotion Consortium was established in year 2020, December year 2020. And so we had a strategic proposal for a 6G R&D. And we put a name of Beyond 5G because we didn't have a clear definition about a 6G yet. So, we don't know what kind of technologies, what kind of ideas were put into a 6G standardization yet. So we intentionally put a name of Beyond 5G at that time. But after that, so we established the two committees under general meeting, the planning and the strategy committee, and also international committee. And I'm wearing the hat of chairman of international committee. And there in the planning and the strategy committee, we discussed and came up with the 7 technical directions, where we should be put our efforts in developing the next generation telecommunication infrastructure. And first 3 in this figure are very familiar to you probably because in 5G, we discussed the ultra fast and large capacity and ultra low latency and ultra numerous connectivity. And we're gonna increase the KPI of each of these 3 items by order of magnitude, like 10 times faster, 100 times faster, 1/10 of the latency, and such things. So this is called a further upgrade of 5G features. But we think also that the 4 directions, such as ultra low power consumption, which is related to carbon emission reduction, and ultra security and resiliency, which is also means that building a sustainable society, because we have to protect our life, safety and privacy preservation, which is very important for our social life. And autonomy, so we are running out of network operators because we have lots of, we put a lot of capacity into the network, but we have to manage it. And autonomy is a very important aspect. And there, also softwareization, maybe we're gonna touch upon a softwareization aspect later today probably, but softwareization plays a very important role here because we are putting a complex function into the network infrastructure. So softwareization, making things quickly modifiable and updatable features in the network infrastructure is very important. And finally, scalability. So this is related to what Max pointed out. So we have no boundary these days in the planet. We have to create a global connectivity to achieve a sustainable planetary scale our social society. So there we use the satellite, low orbit satellite, and HAPS, the high altitude platform stations. And we also extend our communication coverage over to the ocean and space. So these are the 7 directions. So this is a technical directions, but we are trying to add a new features to contribute to the sustainable and the new values. So which is perfect for today's topic. So I have many things to talk about. It's just picked, one effort, one aspect from the industry, NTT in Japan. So they formed this ION Global Forum recently. ION stands for Innovative Optical and Wireless Network, and they set a very ambitious goal of reducing carbon gas emissions down to 80% by the year 2030. I think this is a very ambitious goal. And the year 2040, they say that they are trying to reduce this carbon emission by ION. So that's an all optical network. We use optical network extensively so that we can reduce the carbon emission by 55%. And in order to achieve the carbon neutrality, they say that we have to reduce another 45% by renewable clean energy. So we don't know what's going to happen. We can achieve that or not. But setting up this goal is one aspect of achieving this sustainable society in terms of energy efficiency. So getting back to this ultra low power consumption, so by doing this, by using the optical network, as we think that we can achieve the 1/100th of power consumption in the future. But as Jim said, it's not just about energy efficiency. So let me introduce one MOU that we signed up between Finland and the Japan Beyond 5G Promotion Consortium. So the goal of this MOU is to exchange information and publication, personal exchange, and collaborative research and development projects. And one of the activities recently we had is that the Finland and Japan joint seminar for Beyond 5G. As you may know, the Prime Minister of Finland, Sanna Marin, came to Japan, and we had this great symposium. And I was chairing this panel with all the experts. One of them is from Oulu University, one of the organizers of this 6GSymposium, Professor Ladwa, and CEO of Nokia, and the president of Finland Academy of Finland. And we discussed this, how we can achieve sustainable society using this advanced telecommunication And we came up with lots of ideas in this panel discussion. So the one of them is, of course, energy efficiency, but we came up with this softwareization and open interface type of network infrastructure to create a new ecosystems. So you can read more about what happened in this event, and we have a report, press release already. So I'm going to skip the detail here, but in a 6G flagship website, you can read about it. So let me, touch upon this Open RAN things, because I just mentioned the softwareization and open interface. So this is something happening in the industry. And so the industry thinks that we should define an open interface between the various components which consist of a 6G network. So right now it's about 5G, but now we are talking about 6G extension of this Open RAN. So the idea here is that in order to increase the number of stakeholders to construct this next generation cyber infrastructure, so we define open interface and invite lots of new players, new stakeholders to define new ecosystems. And because we take it very, significantly, so then we established the Open RAN subcommittee within this Beyond 5G Promotion Consortium. Maybe we can discuss this about that later. So in summary, so as Jim said, it's not just about energy efficiency to create a sustainable society. So I gave these 4 items here just for the sake of discussion. So we think that the green transmission is an investment. So return ROI. So we call it green ROI. We have to think about return on investment about green transformation. And as I said, as Max said, recycling of the infrastructure, the sustainability by softwareized infrastructure, because once we have a general purpose hardware, we can define the new functions easily and flexibly. So sustainability can be achieved by softwareized infrastructure. And as I said, open interface for equipment for economic security and a new ecosystem. That's also important for a sustainable infrastructure. And finally, social acceptance and consent development for advanced technologies is very important, because we are researchers, developing a new technology all the time. But now we have to think about the social acceptance and consent development, how to put that advanced technology into practice. That's a very important issue. Thank you very much for your attention, and I get back to Jim. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eki. Very helpful and informative. And I tend to agree that strong emphasis on ecosystems, coordination and cooperation between different groups, entities, geographies, countries, etc., is critical to make much progress and make a success in tackling some of these sustainability issues. So thank you for that. At this point, I would like to move on to Marie-Paul Odini from HPE, and some introductory thoughts from Marie-Paul.
Thank you. Let me share my slide. Yep. Okay, thanks a lot. So yeah, I'm Marie-Paul Odini, as said, with HPE. I'm a distinguished technologist, and I'm also very technical. I've been spending my career into technology, but lately I'm spending more time on sustainable technology. We all know that telecommunications have been changing the world, helping people to communicate better and so on, and really bringing lots of value, to the people on this planet. But we also know that there is an impact of these ICT and telecom technologies. And so these days I'm spending, most of my energy in trying to help to reduce this environmental impact that we're talking about. I've helped founding the Green G working group in the DECG Alliance, and I'm sharing that group, and I'm also contributing to some other standards and working with my colleagues also to help, adapt our processes and our products to be more sustainable inside HP. So I will be briefly giving you an overview of some of these aspects with a few slides here. I can move the slides, that's better. Okay, and I'll change with a brief overview of what's going on today. I think you may see my screen. So there are some obvious things that everybody sees. There are droughts in many parts of the world, and it's evolving, pretty dramatically, because 2/3 of the worldwide population could be under water scarcity and stress conditions by 2025. So it's like tomorrow, and it's already happening in many parts of the world. Where people are, lacking water. Even in France, we have agriculture that is dramatically starting to lack water in many parts of the country. Then we have fires. That's also a very obvious thing that people can see around. And we have more and more of these big fires. You've seen California, you've seen Portugal. They are devastating. They are producing lots of carbon. I think, some numbers are given here. And it's just increasing. I was just talking to somebody in charge of the national forest in France. And this is their main concern because it's already very dry and it's very hot already. And these big fires, very quickly, they get out of control. And then you have floods. We get all this, climate change and disaster happening with, big precipitation and floods. Very much in the US, in some parts of Asia, and IPCC, with the organization, intergovernmental organization that is working on climate change and consolidating all these research papers, are predicting that this is increasing. And if we increase by 1 degree the global temperature, these type of events could increase by 7%. So it's not linear, it's very much exponential. And this is one of the big concerns that we have, and that overall a scientific community and even people like us have, which is that we need to get this temperature increase under control. There's been the Paris Agreement, who has given recommendations to remain below 2 degrees and, if possible, below the 1.5 degrees. And the IPCC, again, has proven, with the research papers that they have consolidated, thousands of research papers from all the world, that one of the main issues with climate change was because of the CO2 emissions. And so we need to reduce these CO2 emissions, and we need to do it now, because there is a kind of inflection point or tipping point by 2025. And of course, lots of people are aware of that, but maybe not enough, because we keep increasing our emissions in many areas. And we need to reduce that. Of course, lots of companies have already committed to reduce CO2 emissions or greenhouse gas emissions. Europe has set some targets to reduce by 55% by 2030. ITU for the telecom industry has also set a target to reduce by 45% also by 2030 for the ICT industry. And we know, from this graphic from IPCC, that we need to really reduce dramatically no later than 2025 to get into one of these lower curve, to remain below this 1.5 or 2%. And we already know that we are not really on the right track. So everybody needs to get into action, either individually or with your companies or as a consumer. And this is even beyond CO2 emissions. because beyond CO2 emissions, we are also impacting a lot the planet in terms of water, in terms of land occupation, in terms of the materials that we use, that we are extracting, the waste we are generating. And this is why we have launched this Green G working group inside the Next G Alliance. It's to look into all these different aspects, of course, with a focus on the telecom industry, on the mobile industry. But this is also an example for the other industries of things, that can be achieved and tackled, not just in terms of energy consumption and renewable energy, CO2 emission and so on, but also in terms of the way we use water, the way we actually transform water, heat water, and avoid doing that to the environment. The way we use materials, the way we may recycle materials to use less materials in, let's say, a mobile device, where we use 60 of the elements of the periodic table, for instance, when we know that in terms of waste, we only recycle 45 or less than 50% of the electronic waste in Europe, which is already, quite sensitive to the topic and has already set, lots of process in place and regulation and so on. But we need to go beyond that. We need to do that across all the regions, every country in the planet, and we need to help, companies to do that. And we need also to educate consumers so that they are sensitive to that. They look into the products that they are buying. They make sure that, the products that they are buying have been using recycled equipment as much as possible, that they can be repaired. There is actually regulation now in France asking for products to show a repairability index. And there is a target to get 60% or so of the electronic products to be repairable by 2025, I believe. So there are things like that being put in place, but we need, of course, more and more, and we need this regulation to be adopted as well, which is an important element. When it comes to mobile networks, in our paper, and you can get access to the paper, it's public, the Green G white paper that we issued in January, you will find a number of details on the assessment of what the mobile industry is using today, and some recommendations on what can be done in these different areas. And we are actually working also on KPIs, because KPIs are very important to be able to measure and control and make progress, in our sustainability journey. So metrics in, of course, CO2 emissions and GHG emissions towards that net zero carbon emission that we're aiming to by 2050 or sooner. Actually, more and more we are saying it should be by 2040 or even sooner. We need to reduce the water consumption. We need to avoid to deploy big data centers and so on in a water stress area, because we are using this water sometimes for cooling data center. Maybe we need to think about other ways to cool down water data center as well, with free air cooling or things like that. We need to pay attention to the water that we reject to avoid having hot water back into the rivers, for instance. We need also to be very conscious of the material that we are using. Avoid as much as possible this rare material, which are very damaging to extract on the land. And also because they are rare, so they are putting our economy at risk, which is another aspect. We need to recycle as much as possible, and we need to use this recycled equipment. And talking about recycling, we need to work with the full value chain, with suppliers, with consumers, and so on, to make sure that all these processes are being put in place. So that, of course, we are talking about 6G and sustainable 6G, but there are things we can do today, and all the learnings, all the best practice, all the reduction that we're gonna implement today will take us to a truly sustainable 6G when it comes out, because 6G is not gonna be before 2030, 2032, and so on. And we cannot wait until 2030, 2032 to do things. We need to do things today and as much as possible today, so that when we reach out to this next generation, we have all these improvements in terms of the land footprint, the water savings, and all these elements which are becoming more important than actually the bandwidth that we're getting or the density that we're getting. Because honestly, I mean, we already have lots of density, lots of bandwidth. So today, I mean, the priority is really on sustainability, and we need to really educate, the industry and the people on these elements. Of course, the vendors, the industry players have a key role to play. As HP, we've set sustainability goals very early on. We have defined science-based targets. We have intermediate target sets by 2025. We're already ahead of our targets in some areas, and that's not just sourcing with renewables. As mentioned earlier, it's not just doing that, it's also reducing the energy we consume, reducing the water we consume, and really we need to get to this sobriety that we are talking about to be able to deliver sustainable services to our customers. We need also to look into the full supply chain, value chain, and embrace and implement this circular economy. Also with suppliers, we are spending lots of time to educate our suppliers, to educate them on how to recycle, on how to return equipment to us, for us to recycle, and so on. We educate our customers as well to help them also to get into this more sobriety mindset, to move to as a service, to avoid wasting too much energy, and rely on our expertise to be more efficient, as we are saying, and also to help them to recycle the equipment that they don't use anymore. So that's just in a nutshell some of the key elements I wanted to share. And again, my message is that any one of us needs to act towards sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. That's very helpful and informative and comprehensive. So thank you very much for that. I'm delighted to say that we have been joined by Seema Ansari from Deutsche Telekom and also the NGMN. So we welcome her. Welcome Seema to present some slides. I would just like to say before Seema kicks off with her slides again, please do send through questions in the Q&A session, and I'll pick those up as soon as we move to the panel discussion. Seema. Are you still connected, Seema? Oh, I think Seema's just connecting to audio. Connected to audio. Hello.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Hi.
Absolutely, we can. So if you have slides, please do beam them out. If not, Alex is teed up to beam them out for you.
Yeah, I can share the slides myself. Just hold on. So I hope you can see the slides. And before actually I go into them, thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here talking to all of you. I will directly start with the strategy from Deutsche Telekom, which we have updated. So for those of you, I'm not sure if there was an introduction round in the beginning already. My name is Seema Ansari, and I'm working as a Senior Partner Manager at Deutsche Telekom. And also I'm co-leading NGM and Alliance Green Future Networks program. And today I will be talking a little bit about what we are doing at Deutsche Telekom in terms of sustainability and what we are driving within NGM and Alliance. So I have a couple of slides to focus on those ones. I will not go through the details of each and every topic, but I just want to mention here that Besides the growth and building a scalable telco as a platform, we have sustainability as a part of our core strategy. You can see here is simplify, digitalize, accelerate, and act responsibly. And this is what we at Deutsche Telekom are driving. And in terms of the goals that we have set for ourselves, which were also updated last year, that by 2025, we are planning to have net zero for direct and indirect energy consumption. And we already have switched to 100% renewable energy all across Deutsche Telekom Group, both in Europe and across Atlantic. By 2030, we are planning to reduce 25% emission reduction per customer for the value chain emissions. And by 2040, the aim for us is to become net zero in our overall value chain. And of course, they are aligned with the science-based targets. So I will directly go to the next slide, which is highlighting a bit on the energy challenge and motivation. So of course, we want to reduce the carbon emissions and we want to reach net zero targets. But on top of that, we also see a huge energy challenge for ourselves, because we see a massive growth in the traffic, and we also would like to make sure that this growth does not really lead into more and more carbon emissions, even though we have switched to complete renewable energy. But this does not really mean that we would like to spend more than is needed, because the best energy, as you can imagine, is the one that we do not use at all. And that's one of the reasons why we look into the topic of energy so closely. We have this, apart from the huge consumption, we have a huge cost increase as well. Then the availability of the renewable energy is also another topic. And here we are trying also our best to make sure that we explore all different options which are available. And we are also looking into the production of renewable energy ourselves. We have multiple pilots running within Europe to identify how we can integrate the renewable energy together with our network management system. This is a lot of work which we are running together with our vendors. And of course, we have a lot of pressure from our customers, from our stakeholders to become much more, let's say, sustainable. And I believe that reducing the energy consumption is one of the best ways forward. So this, apart from having the renewable energy consumption in the networks. When I look into the scope 3 of our overall emissions, this is something which I would like to highlight here, because as you can imagine, we have massively reduced our scope 1 and 2 emissions, but we have around 98% of our emissions at the moment for Deutsche Telekom coming from the scope 3. And here you see a very nice distribution of those emissions from the direct, indirect, and in the value chain. And you can see that a huge portion is actually from the emissions in the value chain, where we have 62% in the upstream and 38% in the downstream. Therefore, we also see that the cooperation with our suppliers and implementation of the product-related sustainability requirements within our procurement decision is essential to make sure that we are able to reach our climate goals. Based on what we have already in our company, we are also trying to go into discussion with other operators, with other vendors, and come up with common solutions. And that's also one of the reasons that we are driving the Green Future Networks in the NGMN Alliance. And this Green Future Networks program was actually started in 2021 itself. We had many different topics which we were tackling also in the past year, which were related to the energy efficiency, the metering aspect for the mobile networks, and also going into a bit of details for the LCA assistance for the network equipment, especially focusing on to the mobile and fixed ones. This year, we are kind of continuing all that work which was done in the last year, and here we have got 4 working groups which are driving those topics. The first working group is basically working on setting up the supply chain sustainability criteria, which means that here we are working together with the other operators and also with the vendors to understand what are the topics which we as operators can take a closer look into when making our procurement decisions. And you can imagine that for us, for decades, there were only two criteria to make such procurement decisions where we are spending billions of euros. This was the technology and the pricing. And now we are trying to change this entire mentality and the way we make these decisions, because it's not good for business, and it's definitely not helping us to reach our goals, our sustainability goals. So that's one of the reasons why we at Deutsche Telekom are also highly driving it. We have actually in our company made it as a 20% criteria. So out of the overall procurement decision, we will have at least 20% weighting for the supply chain sustainability only, which means that we are looking into what the vendors are providing us in terms of the network equipment, what exactly is going in terms of material, what exactly is going in terms of the repairability, the modularity aspects of all those equipments, and if there is a refurbishing element also provided by the vendors. So all of those topics we are trying to understand, and of course this is a pilot phase for us. So we are also trying to learn in this process what is available in the market and what is not, and how we can work together with the vendors to improve all that, because we believe that it's a journey where we are all together on, and it makes sense to work with them to come to a point where we are having much more sustainable procurement. So this is the first working group which works together on setting up such criteria. The second working group is going in the direction of the reduction of the environmental impact. And here we are not necessarily focusing only on the carbon part. You also heard a little bit before from Marie-Paul's presentation about the relevance of the water footprint and so on. All of these aspects are tackled in this group, and I'm glad that Marie-Paul is also a part of this working group and also heavily driving together with a lot of other companies who are participating here to understand what else we need as ICT sector to understand first of all, and then how we can reduce that impact. The third working group from the NGMN Alliance Green Future Networks project is focusing on network energy efficiency. We already explored, and let's say we scratched the surface of the network energy efficiency topic in our previous phase, which means in 2021. We were looking there into different strategies which the operators can implement within their networks to reduce the overall energy consumption, and we were looking into the energy saving features which are available. In this year, we are focusing on renewable energy production and how we as operators can, first of all, bring the renewable energy on site, different storage elements, intelligent optimization with the help of AI ML techniques. And then we are also looking into better usage of existing equipment, for example, based on the life cycle assessment or based on, let's say, the usage or the pattern that we see from an RRU or an active antenna unit and how it has been used under different conditions over the past year. So we try to set up some models based on those studies to give the recommendations how an operator can actually optimize the usage of those components, so they are not, so they can be either reused or refurbished also at a later stage. So all of these things go into the network energy efficiency aspect. In the fourth working group, it's a special working group working on defining the green benchmarking for the operators. We already see, first of all, there is a lot of benchmarking available in our industry, looking at the quality experience. We as operators are always judged upon the quality, latency, uplink, downlink speed, and it's so many different criteria. And we also try to understand where we are standing in terms of sustainability. But this working group is basically focusing on understanding how we can bring these two elements together. So how we are not only looking into the sustainability aspect, or how we are not only looking into the quality of experience. So this working group is set up to actually define and understand what makes sense when an operator is benchmarked, and how important it is to also bring the sustainability and the green aspect. If the operator is doing anything in terms of sustainability, do they have any net zero goals, what kind of equipment they're using, how they are running their network, how optimized it is, because you already might know many of our sites are also running even when there is no traffic, because some of the equipment are built in the way that they are consuming energy when there's no traffic load. So many of those aspects are still there. We are trying to understand how and where we can reduce that consumption, where we can switch off some layers to help us reduce energy consumption and make sure that we are only using the power when it is actually needed. But all of these things combined with the things that we are doing for reaching our net zero goals is something that this working group is tackling. So just one more slide I have to give you a glimpse of which companies are participating within these working groups. So you are aware of, so you can see that we have several operators. We have got Deutsche Telekom, Orange, KPN, TNO, Vodafone, Bell Canada, KPN, and so on. Besides, we have many different vendors that you can see also on the screen, ranging from Ericsson, Huawei, Nokia, IBM, Google, and so on. We have some actually research entities as well. We have Umlaut driving heavily also the benchmarking project. As you can imagine, they have a lot of expertise in terms of defining all of that. So this is something which we are currently in the middle of, and the plan is to have some publications within the end of this year. Later in October and November, we are looking into releasing the supply chain sustainability criteria. So that should be the first publication from our side. And I will of course update in the later course of the discussion about the rest of the things that we are driving. And by this slide, I would say thank you from my side, Jim, and maybe I close the presentation in case there are any questions.
Great, thank you very much for that, Seema, and thank you to all of the other panelists. We've overrun a little, so we have just 4 minutes remaining, but I would like to try and squeeze a question in. And I think the best, if we had to pick one question, I think the best one is that we're all agreed that networks need to be more than just energy efficient. The question is, what else should we be considering? And how should we measure that? What KPIs should we introduce? So Max, you touched on this a little in your introduction. Perhaps you'd like to kick us off with an answer to that question.
Yeah, it's a good one. I think there was also a question from the audience that goes a little bit in that direction. I don't think we need new KPIs in that sense to measure what else we need to do. I think we simply need to look at the holistic environmental cost and potentially in the future also societal cost of what we're doing. If we're building a mobile antenna, how much resources to go into that, how much energy also during the manufacturing, how much metal, how much minerals, how much rare earths go into it, and simply consider that variable as well, and introduce an engineering constraint. I'm an engineer, so if you give me a constraint, I will respond to it that says do not use any new materials and work against that constraint. I think that's the one thing we could do, I think, short term now.
Okay, thank you. Aki?
Yes, today I'm surprised to hear all the panelists touch upon very similar thing like supply chain sustainability, not just energy efficiency. And in terms of KPI, I think many people talk about the gas emission reduction type of KPI, but we don't have anything like a KPI for sustainable supply chain kind of stuff yet. What we do have is an open interface definition like Open RAN. But I think probably it's time to define the KPI for other aspects other than energy efficiency. And one example is Open RAN activity, but it's not just an open interface. Maybe we can think about sustainable supply chain activity. I think Simon pointed out this, and they started a new working group, but Japan has not joined that yet. So I think it's not the global. Maybe we can extend that working group to a global level, for example. So I think a global coordination, such as that, is necessary.
Thank you for that. And Marie-Paul, I mean, you touched on KPIs when you presented earlier. You touched on a number of areas which could be measured. So perhaps you could provide some thoughts and also potentially some thoughts on the scope of what should be measured. Is it just network investment or network operations, or the companies that operate the networks? How far up do you go when you want to be your net neutral or whatever your target is?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So even though if I take, the NGA work, even though we said we're not create, a new standard and so on, and I agree with Max, there's already lots of KPIs out there that have been standardized or that have been regulated and so on. The issue I see is that maybe there are too many KPIs and different people use different KPIs. And so it's very difficult to understand, whether a product is actually, sustainable or not, whether an operator is sustainable or not, whether a vendor is sustainable or not. So we need to get a set of common KPIs that people will be using so that as an operator, I know what my supplier provided. As a consumer, I know what my vendors are providing and so on. So that's one aspect. And maybe in some areas, it's not just products. It's also companies, it's also services. And back to what Aki was saying, it's also the whole supply chain, was it sustainable? Is the full life cycle, including the end of life, going to be sustainable? And so that's, and the operation, as you've mentioned, of course, of this product, is it going to be sustainable? So these are all these aspects. And I pointed to a few areas, for instance, deploying data centers in areas which are not under water stress, making sure that the water that is being released is not hotter than the water that was taken, especially if it goes into a river or inside the ocean and so on. These are the kind of metrics that a few people are using, a few countries are regulating, but not enough. And they are impacting biodiversity. And very often we talk about the environment, we think CO2 and greenhouse gas emission, we think maybe materials because they are becoming rare and there is a cost effect and the scarcity effect, but still we don't think enough about the biodiversity. And we all know, especially these days, if we don't control biodiversity more strictly and so on quickly, we are part of this biodiversity and we are at risk. So this is becoming very important. Just as a side note, I have bees and the pollinators, they have been decreasing by 30–60% in some areas. And now we are using drones, So this is really, dramatic for some species and more species. And this is impacting, what we drink, what we eat, and so on. This is impacting us directly.
Okay, thank you. And we're a little over time, but I'd just like to include you in the questions, Seema. So we've talked a little about communications networks and extending out the monitoring of sustainability and how far up the organization you go. What about externalities? So if I use a telecoms network to watch a video of a cat on my handset in 8K HD, you might not be prepared to invest much CO2 emissions to support that. If I'm using the same network to support a fleet management solution, then clearly there's a very substantial benefit that's being unlocked there. How would you factor this in?
You raised a very good point, and in many of the discussions, we also look into this topic because we as operators, we are judged basically on the quality of experience that we are providing to our customers, and our aim is to give the best quality as possible. But the amount of traffic that goes on to that network, we have absolutely no control on that. And you can also imagine that we bring more capacity, which means a lot more electricity usage, a lot more, of course, carbon emissions and so on. But this does not necessarily reflect into what's happening with that. And in many forums also, we have in discussions about how we make sure that we have the right amount of capacity for the right services that we are playing, and how exactly this can be controlled via the regulations, the policymakers, and so on and so on. So there is no direct let's say relation, and we are of course investing heavily into the infrastructure to make sure that the customers are receiving the best quality. But in terms of what goes onto that network, in terms of what services are there, we do need those slices that you can imagine for the different use cases. So when there is a fleet management system, this has completely different requirement from the network. So the latency, the quality of experience, and this is completely different from a connected car than a person watching something on Netflix or something like that. So all of these different use cases need different mapping of the network and different slices for that.
Great. Thank you very much. And in fact, thank you to all of my panelists. We are out of time, unfortunately. I think this is a topic which we barely scratched the surface of and we could spend a lot longer talking about it, but we have run out of time. So at this point, I'd like to say thank you very much to Aki Nakao, Marie Polodini, Max Schultz, and Seema Ansari. So thank you all, and thank you to everyone who's joined us and to those who have contributed questions. Thank you all.